You okay, pal?
Yeah, it's good to see you again.
So I just wanted quickly, can we just introduce yourself for people watching at home, who it is that you are and what that you do?
Of course, so I'm 𝘾𝘼𝙍𝙀𝙍. I'm an actor and an award-winning filmmaker. I've been in the industry altogether for about 14 years.
So what is it that drove you to want to be involved in this?
Well, to be honest, I was severely bullied in school and I had a language disorder when I was younger. So I needed an outlet. I didn't really have an outlet. And drama at first was used as a form of therapy to help me overcome my language disorder. I had a really strong stutter. And we had a different teacher one day. And what happened was, this teacher wasn't familiar with the condition that I had. So she just kind of threw us in the deep end. A bit similar to this hot seat, and you had to be a character. And I was a bag of nerves, and everyone else in the class were on the edge of their seats because they always had a good kick whenever I stuttered. And I was just sweating so much. So I did the monologue, and I didn't stutter once, and everyone was just... And it hit me what it was. Playing other people was more comfortable and more satisfying to me than being myself. But once I overcame that and used that as therapy, the passion came along with it, and the determination and the interest. And to me, I thought, actually, this could be a career. This is something I really want to do for the rest of my life, and it just went on from there.
So was there any other influences that you had to drive you to get into this?
Well, my nan, actually, she wasn't an actress by any means, but she was a very playful person. What we used to do was, we used to make audio dramas together. So she'd get the tape recorder out, and she'd get like a tray of gravel, and she'd get me to like step in the gravel to create footsteps. And it would be a different part each week. I didn't think it would ever be a career then, because I was just so young, I didn't know what I wanted to do. But what my nan was able to do was, she was able to sort of disarm me from the rest of the world that was going on. And you know, I think just her nature, I think it was quite an inspiration to me to just sort of let go.
You've had a good crack at a lot of different areas in film now. So was it primarily acting that was the main driving point?
Acting was the main driving point, and still is today. It's still my main profession, my main focus. The filmmaking came in because I wanted to explore on-screen acting, film and television. And I wanted to practice at home when I wasn't in class. And the best way to do that was to invest in the camera, so you can perform in front of the camera and you can just get used to how you look and just accept, you know, at every angle, even the angles that you may not find flattering, whether you like it or not, that's how you look, and you just sort of accept it. I started to learn filmmaking techniques. I then started to explore other avenues of production, and from there narrative came into place, and I thought I could make a film here. I could create my own opportunity.
So it's been very exciting that you've been able to jump from these different areas in film as well. So you've done a bit of theatre, and you've jumped from shorts to features as well. So what sort of the logistical challenges of doing such things?
Well, from a financial standpoint, which is the bane of everyone really doing short and features. Short films are very common to make because they're very manageable to digest, not just to make but also to watch as well. So going from a short to a feature-length film, obviously from a narrative standpoint, you've got to find a narrative that's fit for a feature-length standard. But also as well, you've got to think seriously about budget as well, because it is going to take longer to do. You're asking more of people's time as well, and so you've got to be much more organised, much more thorough in your planning, because you could be doing this like with Dandelicious, you know. It ended up being longer than I hoped because of the pandemic, but I had a plan in place originally, and I knew, with it being such a small budget film, and I'm asking for a lot of people's time as well, so I knew other people had other things to do at the time, so I had to spread that out longer than perhaps a mainstream production could do. You know, I think if Dandelicious was a mainstream production, that could have been made in 6 weeks perhaps, you know, but originally it was going to be made about a year. It was going to take about a year to make, because I had to be considerate of other people's commitments with other things, and you know, people have got to make money elsewhere, you know, so it's very important. So there's a huge difference, but when you do cross that line into feature length, it's worth it.
What's it actually like getting that budget sorted out? So I can imagine it's different from shorts to features.
We did go to the likes of the BFI, for example, and a lot of it was just because it was such a niche subject, and I learned that we had to look for resources, financial resources outside, and there might be investors. So one of those avenues that we looked at was a Kickstarter campaign, where people, the audience, can help fund the film. But with the luck we had with the Teddy Boy subculture was because it was such a larger subculture than I even anticipated. It's very underground these days, but it still exists, and it's in great numbers all around the world. It was very easy to pitch to them the kind of film that we wanted to make, and for them to pledge, because they wanted the film to happen just as much as we wanted the film.
It must feel very humbling to know that there are other people out there that believe in your project, to want to fund it as well.
Absolutely, yeah. But even with the Kickstarter campaign and with the amount of people pledging, we had to be realistic with the goal. So the goal we put was about 2,000. So where does the rest of the funding come in outside of that 2,000? For me, it was my own decision personally to self-finance the film. I don't really have a social life. I'm a bit of a workaholic. So I was able to save all this money, and I was able to assist the film outside of the Kickstarter campaign as much as I could, really. Some budget cuts had to be made here and there, but I knew that I had to put all my eggs in one basket with this. This was, out of all the films I had in my mind that I wanted to make, this film was my ace. This was the ace I had hidden up my sleeve. I was going to put everything into it. But otherwise, I would encourage people to, you know, go to as many studios as possible, and funding councils as well. Even the Lottery Arts Council fund projects as well. In that case, sometimes you have to meet certain quotas, which is hard to do with a 1950s Teddy Boy film. It's, you know, very, especially with a lot of its historical context, but it's not impossible. I think you got to look. I think it has to be the right film. I think you got to look for the right people. It's not impossible to make in just all together, but sometimes if it's something that's a little bit outside of the box, I think you should look elsewhere for funding, but it's not impossible.
100%. So just backtracking a little bit, back onto the roles that you've been exposed to. So you've got the preferred role of acting, but what's it been like actually having exposure to all these different areas? It
does change your perspective of the art of filmmaking and also on-screen performance as well. I think it's come to my advantage becoming a filmmaker as well as an actor of screen as well as stage, because when I do a performance for the camera, I'm also keeping other things in mind into other considerations, such as, you know, how big is my performance? Am I going to be in shot? How loud am I? Am I too loud? Am I too quiet? And I think you take direction better as well from other directors, because you speak in the same language, because you convey the same language yourself when you're behind the camera.
Is it like swayed any of your passions on certain areas of film?
It does in a way, yeah, because I think even with writing as well, there's again with the advantage of being an actor. If sometimes when I write, I read out what I've written, and it might not have anything to do with me as an actor at all. It might be someone else in mind, but being an actor myself, when I recite the lines I've just written, if it sounds good to me, then it's going to sound fantastic. Everything just kind of lines up into place as well, and you kind of have an idea of how it would look on film and stuff like that, how it would sound. in the professional setting as well. So, you know, there's many aspects of it that come into play which change my perspectives of acting, film acting, and how I bring that to the table and whatnot.
So throughout the course of your career, what other failures have you experienced, and how have you done this to overcome?
One of my the one thing I look at in regards to failures is, which is any advice I'd give to any artist today, actor, filmmaker, musician, is don't play it safe. I think I've spent the majority of my career playing it safe, and I look back in hindsight and I don't really have a lot of regrets in life, but from a professional standpoint, you know, I look at the fact that choosing certain roles because it's similar to another role that I've played and it's what people would expect of me, you know, and doing that you become typecast, and being typecast means that people struggle to see you as other things, you know. And for me, an advice that was given to me by someone, which is a valid advice actually, is someone else in Liverpool who was typecast for a certain role. His advice to me was, I'd rather be typecast than not cast. So I took that on board and I went along with it for a couple of more years. And then, I don't know, I just wasn't challenged anymore. I wasn't getting satisfaction. No, I think people were quite hesitant because they thought, well, you know, that's what you do. You're known for a certain role, so I think you should stick to it. And I look back and I think to myself, if only I challenged myself a little bit earlier. My greatest failures, I think, in my career is, you know, I think being versatile has been long overdue. I shouldn't have waited as long, really.
Do you think, actually, when you get into that position where you are typecast, do you think it becomes very, very difficult to break the mould of that?
Absolutely,
Yeah.
Because when you suggest an idea like a Teddy Boy film, Andrew Games is playing that Teddy Boy, and everyone who's familiar with my work would kind of like jolt back and go, is he? You know, and then there's already an expectation then from people's minds, and sometimes when there's already an expectation, it just stops there and people don't think of you or consider you any further. And you know, I was very lucky because when I was typecast, it was during a period of time, just by a stroke of luck, that in Liverpool they were after actors to play characters who may not be strongly Scouse, who may be a little bit more neutral in their accent or in their dialect. And I was just lucky that I fitted the bill for a lot of that. But there was a lot of interest at the time, throughout that window of time where all those opportunities came up, and the phone was ringing regularly enough, you know, it was consistent enough. And then, like with anything, the phone stops ringing one day because there isn't a demand for actors in Liverpool to play that sort of character, you know. And then it's not until that happens when you realise, ooh, I'm in trouble here. I really need to break that mould, and I need to do something to kind of prove that I can do other things, by which point it's too late in a lot of ways, because people have already associated you and recognised you as a type of character. And it is quite hard. I think it's human nature as well, where, you know, anything that's new or anything that's different or anything that's sort of unfamiliar to what's already familiar is quite alienating, and people don't like that. And I think people struggle to look past that sometimes, even when it comes to actors playing different parts. And I think that's where the opportunities lack, is people just going, well, no, Andrew wouldn't do that because Andrew's done this for God knows how many years, so of course he wouldn't, you know.
So that was fantastic. What hurdles specifically to Dandelicious have you faced? I know you mentioned about the pandemic before, prolonging this experience. Can you just talk a bit more about that?
Of course, yeah. So when the first trailer for Dandelicious came out, that was in 2019, and the response that we had was phenomenal. Not only were the Teddy Boys into the film, but the general public were into the film as well. They were curious, they were interested. We were able to gain 50,000 views in total in a week, all platforms combined. But for a small independent feature film, I think it's fair to say with a cast where there's no big names in it at all, you know, that's no small feat, that, and we were really proud of that. And it all just started to pay off, you know, like just the hard work that we put into it. People were interested, there was an audience for this. So we were really excited. And then, then the pandemic came, and it just threw everything out the window. And it was very tough, it was very, very hard, because as it killed off the production, so, you know, in regards to its scheduling and whatnot, it just came to a sudden halt. It also killed the momentum as well, and people started to forget about it. In hindsight, maybe perhaps people involved in the film started to give up on it as well. Not that it was anyone's fault, it was just the nature of the pandemic. So we slowly got back into production once we were able to get the clear from the local authorities that we were a private limited film company and that we only had a certain number of people on set. So it just slowed things down. Now, when the second trailer came out, we were able to get some film festivals lined up. And considering a lot of the momentum died down, as I mentioned, I really wasn't expecting much at all. And then suddenly it started getting nominated for awards. Suddenly other film festivals were interested, in film festivals from different countries as well. And as the film started to do well and the reviews started to get stronger and stronger and stronger, not just by critics but also by the audience as well, the core audience that we had before the pandemic caught wind of it and thought, well, maybe we should give this a go. And it's been great. It's been at 20 film festivals during the recording of this interview. It's been nominated for 11 awards, ranging from Best Feature Film, Best International Feature, Best Director, Best Actor, and it's won 5 awards, ranging from Best Drama, Best International Feature, Best Independent Feature. And like with any film, you know, though it's done really well and though it's had a lot of momentum, it's also been subject to criticism as well. It's a film of a very, very acquired taste, and you know, I think the key really is to not take the film seriously, because the film doesn't take itself seriously. It's a stylized neo-western. It's not Citizen Kane. It's not, you know, it's not Schindler's List, and it's fun to watch and it was fun to make.
What was the initial fascination with the Teddy Boys? Because we've obviously got the character Marty. What was the ideas behind creating this character?
I've always been fascinated with history in general. A lot of my work that I've created myself has mostly been historic. I was always interested, but I didn't make the film because I thought, you know, no one would be interested to watch it because it is such a niche subject, really. Someone of your age, did you know what a Teddy Boy was before Dandelicious?
No, this was my first introduction to it.
Exactly. It's such a niche subject. So I thought no one would want to watch this film. I would, but I don't think anyone else would, so I didn't make it for a long time. But the thing that always fascinated me and captivated my attention was the fact that this was the first youth movement that went against the grain, that was anti-establishment. People associate punks with anti-establishment, which is true, but they weren't the first to do it. The mods weren't the first to do it. Hippies, though they weren't juvenile delinquents, they weren't the first to do it. The first to do it was the Teddy Boys. And they were able to get their elders to take them seriously. Okay, they had to be a little bit reckless by doing it, but I think the after effects of doing it by just living life the way they wanted to live it, I think for future generations to come, it gave adults an opportunity to take the likes of yourself very, very seriously. Not that you're going around beating people up, but you're an independent thinking individual.
Yeah.
You have a mind of your own. It's your own prerogative what you want to do. And I think now adults, since that time, when children, teenagers, young adults all of a sudden spoke up to the adults and the adults were taken back, I think that's had a long-lasting effect where adults are now respecting the youth So that always fascinated me about it from a society standpoint, but also from a stylistic standpoint. You know, these people who love rock and roll have a very reckless lifestyle, but they're so smartly dressed as well. It's a brilliant juxtaposition. And how fun would it have been at that time to be young, to have discovered this subculture and to go against the establishment? We all have a rebellious side, and I think they were the first to really express that.
So Dandelicious now is actually screened at 20 film festivals?
20 film festivals, yeah.
What's that done for your image as well as your production company? How's it affected the day-to-day runnings?
Well, as a public figure, it's taken me outside of Merseyside, and there are people outside of the north of England who are familiar with the film and therefore familiar with who I am as well. Even people from different countries as well. You know, there's people who discovered Dandilicious from a film festival that they were in and thought, oh, I'll give that a watch, and then discovered me. And I think what it's done, I think the film's reinvented me to people who already knew of me. And I think there's a new appreciation now where they go, okay, there's so much more to him than just whatever it was I thought about him beforehand. He works hard, he's a grafter, and he makes things happen. I think as, you know, if there is a legacy that I leave behind, you know, when I'm long gone, that I hope is my legacy, and that's the image that I have, is he didn't just sit there twiddling his thumbs, waiting for things to happen. But opportunities have opened, people have shown an interest. This is the most consistent I've ever worked as an actor since Dandilicious. If it wasn't for Dandilicious, I wouldn't have an agent now. As a company, I mean, obviously it's brought more eyes on APG Films Ltd. And if anything, what it's done, because it is still a small company, it is still growing. So if anything, it's encouraged me to write more, because since the success of the film, people have asked, well, what's next? So obviously I'm like, right, okay. Luckily I've got different ideas, and I'm just going along with different ideas. There's one that's close to production, just waiting to hear back from a few things. And the distribution as well, so when Dandelicious goes through distribution and it can be seen and watched from the comfort of people's homes, you know, DVD, Blu-ray, Amazon, Netflix if they're interested as well, you know. That's where the distribution side comes into it as well. That's been the main sort of dialogue that's been going on with the company at the moment. That's been the busiest sort of aspect of the company before we put anything else into production.
It seems like there's some very exciting things to come. Very much look forward to see these things. You know, what advice or would you give some filmmaker like me breaking into this industry?
Advice I would give to not just filmmakers, but any artist really. I think you've got to be self-sustaining, because you are a business really. You are a brand. When you're a filmmaker, you're not just a guy behind the camera. You're a business model. I think you need to have thick skin. My relationship with the industry is how I would describe it. I love the industry. Sometimes the industry's not loved me back in return. It's nothing personal. It's just the wheel keeps turning. You're in the conversation 1 minute, next minute, who cares?
Andrew, thank you very much for coming. I really appreciate this, and I appreciate the time.
My absolute pleasure, mate. Thank you very much.
What's next?
Of course.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.